Amidst the Ukrainian crisis, there is a question about why so many Indian students, medical students, were studying abroad in smaller countries like Ukraine. What is the reason that so many Indian students prefer foreign destinations, especially smaller countries like Ukraine? I am joined by Professor Amarjiva Lochan, who is a member at the Indian Center for Migrations and also handles the foreign students at the Delhi University. So, I want to begin with the basic question as to why so many Indian students prefer these smaller countries like Ukraine for medical studies.
Well, this is a question which is like a history behind back 40 years when USSR was USSR. And the destiny of Indian students going for study started in early days with a very genuine reason to learn about mining. And Indian School of Mines, Dhanbad, was established by them, USSR people. So there was the beginning of the dialogue of academic nature first time. Later on, when 70s came, USSR was in a problem situation, and we do have a certain kind of growth of policy of admission, education. We found that number of students started going for medical subjects, because this is the year when you find new medical requirements are coming up in India. So when we talk about Ukraine, we are not talking about Ukraine exactly. It was part of USSR. So whoever will get admission in this university or that place, they will go all around USSR those days. And the number of USSR, if I remember, was not 30,000, 40,000 minimum in 1980s. That was USSR.
40,000 students.
Yeah, all for medical I'm talking about, not for other regions. And this trend continued after the break of USSR into different CIS countries, as you know very well. Ukraine became a favorite for 5 reasons, I think so. One, it was nearer to India and nearer to Europe in both ways. Secondly, Ukraine people had a practice of connecting with Indian market for leather export. In 80s and 90s, there was a huge market, people getting jackets from here and selling over there.
Okay.
And other items were being brought by people for daily consumption. And that was the time crisis was increasing, and it was the time when Gorbachev was in the forefront and Boris Yeltsin as being part of Ukraine and all coming up in a big way. Now, that trend of going to a study was there always. The difference was that the dollar was not expensive in 1980s and 1990s. But what happened, the fee structure remained low in Ukraine. When you compare with the fee structure in St. Petersburg today, in Russia, it is 1/2 of that. Okay. So, for example, I can tell you the fees for entire medical course comes to around 43,000, 45,000 per annum, plus expenses on living. So in all together, within 10 lakh rupees, you have a medical degree, which a private university in India would not cost less than about 80 lakhs, 75 lakhs, 35 lakhs, like that. So it was a cost effective factor. One thing was very much forgotten by people, that beginning stage there was a new system of agency coming up to hire and get the students out of Delhi or out of big cities, Jalandhar. They have headquarters like of places all around India. And they would be working against the norms and all conditions, putting them into regular studies. But nobody remembers that all Ukrainian boys and girls from Indian background I'm talking about, study, they had gone to private universities only. None has gone to any Ukrainian university, officially state universities, I mean. So there was a system of agent being paid from both sides, from here also and from the university side also. So even after paying that, the cost was coming 20 lakh rupees. So from 5 lakh cost to become 20 lakh was tolerable by Indians, but not 35, 40 lakhs. So there is a factor for sure, the financial angle. But second angle, which is about incompetence, which we talked about, that they were not incompetent to qualify. Problem is that we do have lots of system of reservations. I'm not talking about abolishing any reservation, but the rationale has been very tough, because when the reservation was introduced in bigger way in India's in Mandal time, it was limited to some areas, not to specialized areas. Like in defense, still we don't have in army, we don't have reservation now.
But do you think, sir, there are lesser seats in the country because we have, if we go through the data, like nearly 16 lakh students sit for the NEET UG course, and then nearly 5 to 6 lakh students qualified. But in terms of seats, we have barely, I think, nearly 90,000 seats. So, is that one of the factors pushing these students to the foreign countries?
Well, that is a factor for sure, but other reason is that the number of private colleges came up in a big way, in mushrooming way, in last 20 years.
Where?
In India.
In India.
Before there was only source was government hospitals and government colleges, and number was very small. And you know, in India, policy whatever government it has been, they didn't have huge budget for health sector. So when you don't have a health sector care and you have 1 lakh pay one radiologist, you have 40,000 people and one doctor of so-called doctor, any variety of doctor. So the situation has been very grim. We are not comparing to American data of 1 to 1,000 doctor. You know, we cannot compete with that, and it is really huge number of people to work it out. Right. Problem is that competence was very important. One factor which Indian boys in Ukraine have forgotten, that their experience becomes sometimes clumsy when they come back to India, because they do not have experience in tropical diseases. You know, in India we have different sets of diseases which are known in practice by your own way of being intern in India. But when you have, there is a cold weather. Right. So they do have a different set of bimari and illness, but they can handle others because of knowledge. The theoretical practice is there. Practical practice is not possible even they go back if they want to come back. Secondly, they have also tried to use Ukrainian degree, since they try to be nearer friendly to NATO. They were trying to jump into the Western world by having the degrees of Ukraine. So Ukrainian degrees are recognized in most of the European universities. So there you can go for MD type of things in USA. And USA is a field area, because USA you are paid by case, you are not having salary. Right. So you become richer by more experience and more number of patients.
So you're saying these are three primary factors.
Yes.
Number one being countries like Ukraine being cost effective. Number two, one could have better prospects, future prospects, and then lesser seats back here in the country.
Back here, we didn't have any still national health policy employing lots of doctors, lots of hospitals. Still, we are suffering from the crisis that the doctor in government hospitals are applied and given a job, but they do not go to villages to work. They do find certain reasons to be back to big urban centers to work. So government needs to have some policy. Every MBBS should have 1 year internship plus in village. Then it will be better. Okay. I hope so. This policy requires a lot of changes.
One final question, sir. Had you noticed any upstick, any increase in this trend, in the last 20 years or 10 years, where students are more and more going to the smaller destinations like Ukraine?
In Russian Federation, the number has really gone down. It is comparing to those 80s and 90s, it was a larger number. But in recent time, the number has gone down.
Started to go.
Yeah, because you see, if you are talking about 16,000 students at present in Ukraine, the number was 20,000 5 years ago. Okay. There are lots of new opportunities coming up with private hospitals, private medical colleges. They do finally go for that. And I'm sure with this crisis coming up, they would be much more bound to be back to India and looking for larger number of seats being created by government, because sometimes medical hospitals, private, they are not allowed to have 150 beds. Right. They have limitations. They do apply, but there have been some kind of problems before that you don't have to pay this much. So this is also, yes, there is a downward trend.
Thanks a lot for speaking to us. So that was Professor Lochan, who actually decoded the entire scenario as to why for Indian students who want to pursue medical studies go for smaller locations like Ukraine. And primarily, the bottom line is that it appears to be because of three reasons. Number one being it's cost effective when you compare the studies, the cost of the study from the Indian private universities and the private universities in destinations like Ukraine. Number two, better prospects of jumping into the European world, or for that matter US. And third is that lesser number of seats back home. With video journalist Ankit Singh, this is Amit Bhardwaj for India Today from Delhi.